All right, looks like I'm live. Whoo! It has been a minute. All right, I'm not sure how many people are going to show up. I think I haven't done this in over a month, which is just mind-boggling to me. I think things just whole lot of stuff kept me busy over the past month or so, but I'm really glad to be back and to working on this. I was actually a little nervous because I haven't listened to this since then. But I listened to it a couple times before it and before going live, and yeah, I think I'm excited. I got some ideas. The cool thing is I just finished another semester where I was studying advanced techniques in orchestration. And over the break, I actually spent quite a bit of time overhauling my approach to orchestration. I'm super excited to show that to you guys today, to try and use it to help build some more momentum. If I have things my way, I would like to have this sketch done within 2 weeks. With this session and the following section, I want to have the sketch done so that we can start going through and making it more realistic, and we can start going through some mixing and mastering and cool stuff. Hey, awesome. Oh, we got someone on stream. Let's see, JBat46, finally able to sit in on the stream. Awesome. Glad to have you. All right, so as usual with these things, I'm just going to get to work. If you have any questions about the stuff with the video, things about other videos, any questions whatsoever, feel free to pop them in the comments. But other than that, let's get started. And the first thing I want to do is I want to listen to this just to get so it's fresh in our ears again. Oops. Let's go check out those horns. Horn solo. Yeah, I like that low end. We've got two brazen bass trombones on that. Strings of my melody. Marimba. Where's the marimba going? Something subtle apparently, working on a rhythmic sonata with the low strings, it sounds like. Is this marimba? Yeah, it's marimba. Alright, sounds like we're starting to get to the part of the sketch where we haven't done a lot of work yet. We're still in the B section. We've got those woodwinds playing. And then we're going to return to the A section. What do we got here? Alright, so these are staccato. I'm wondering if they're... No, I don't think they're supposed to be staccato. Actually... Oh yeah, first violins. Oh. There we go. Alright, so that's basically it. Alright, so there we go. I got it fresh again. I'm thinking things through. Alright, excellent. So we have actually done a lot more work on this than I had remembered. So, I mentioned earlier in the stream that this past semester I spent another class studying advanced techniques in orchestration, and that's really helped me further develop my technique and further develop my process for orchestrating, which I think is kind of funny and cool at the same time, that because I've been working on this piece for so long, you guys are able to see my own process grow and develop while we're at it. So I actually took the liberty of already pasting my current process in here. Right now, I like to break it down into macro and micro level considerations. And we'll go through each of the main sections. All of our notes from the previous videos are still here. They're just down, which is kind of fun to look back and see how my process has developed over all this time. But, so let's take a look at the intro again real quick. Oops, there we go. I kind of like this already. I don't think there's much else that needs to be done here. It's kind of subtle. We got some low strings and brass performing. And yeah, I think section A1 is probably pretty good. I'm pretty happy with what we got going on. And then section A2. Pretty good too. I think the big one that we need to start addressing are these B sections here, where we haven't done much. So let's try breaking these down a little bit. Let's shorten our repeat, our loop. We'll start just before measure 25, and we'll stop right. Oh, we'll start right at the stop at B2. So this section right here, what we're going to do is let's go through each of these major considerations. I'm going to highlight this. I'm going to copy it if my computer will let me. It will not let me right click, so I'm just going to control copy. Let's make sure that was, yep, it worked. All right, so let's go through here. All right, so macro level considerations. What overall energy is this section supposed to have in comparison to the rest? All right, so again, throughout my process, I like to keep in mind how does everything fit together. Here, as I've mentioned a couple times in these live videos, we're going with a stereotypical, almost cliche heroes theme here. And in lots of Hollywood hero themes, they have two parts. They have the big, heroic, bombastic A theme, and then a much more lyrical, much more contrasting B theme. And it typically goes A, B, A. Start loud and bombastic, lyrical, loud and bombastic again. Pretty much every heroes theme John Williams has ever written follows that formula. A great example of it is the Indiana Jones theme. I think I mentioned that a couple times. But let's go through here. So overall energy, let's see, compared to the previous section, which is A2, the energy is going to come back down. All right, so this A2 section, we introduced a lot more of the brass, and it really came in heavy. Got it, and then bam. All right, that's when we introduced the melody in the strings and octaves, I believe. So yeah, and then at the end of this, we want to bring it back down to have a controlling thing. Right now, it sounds like we've already gotten the melody orchestrated, and we've got some lower strings and, oddly enough, marimba. I don't remember why I added marimba, other than I just really enjoy marimba. But so now we need to figure out how else we can develop this. But so next, let's take a look at how many layers there are here. So right here, we definitely have a melody. It sounds like we have, let's take a look at this. How does this ostinato compare to the chord progression we've got? All right, separated by part. Where is the marimba? Let's pull that up. There it is. All right, so D, F. So we've got B, D, and F. So yeah, looks like this is our bass line. All right, we've got a nice rhythmic bass line going here. We've got a B minor here. We've got an F sharp minor here. It looks like, or technically that would, yeah, F sharp minor. Yeah, it looks like this is our bass line. All right, just taking a quick cursory glance at it. So we have our melody. We have a rhythmic bass line. And compared to the other levels, we had counter melodies, I believe. Got a comment. This reminds me of my theory classes, except I actually enjoy this and the music being written. Well, thank you. I'm glad. I'm glad that you're learning from this, and I'm glad that you're enjoying it. That's why I do this. I want to try and share this stuff and just make composition more accessible. Too many people think it's this mystic process, and I want to go back to, well, not go back to an old time, but go back to old standards where everyone can just write music if they feel like it. It just feels like part of your life. Anywho, that's me just ranting and mumbling and all that kind of stuff. Let's talk. So I've got a rhythmic bass line. I've got the melody. Now I want the energy to come down here, so I don't want to add too many more layers. One thing I will do is we are going to want harmonies. And I'm going to say part written. All right, to help make it feel lyrical, some moving strings. All right, so we've done voice leading. And if you've seen my series on harmony, you'll have noticed there's one of the very last videos, I believe, if not the last video, is on part writing, which is a little, it's like kind of cheating. It's not actually counterpoint if you want to do counterpoint, but it's a way of taking your harmony and really maximizing the melodic characteristics of it without turning it into actual counter melodies. And we go into I go real in depth on that topic in that video, but today I think we'll just say part written harmonies, and we'll try to our hand at writing some out there. Which layer is in the foreground? In other words, what layer do I want the audience to pay attention to. Of course, melody. 9 times out of 10, if you have a melody, it's going to be in the foreground, or you want it to be in the foreground. I've written some pieces where I didn't want it to be, where you like establish it and it's a good melody, and then you pull it back to contrast it with some other element. A good example would be Vogel im Kaffig from Attack on Titan. If you haven't listened to that, it's incredible. Go listen to it. But at one point in that piece, the melody takes the background. All right, well, not quite the background. It falls into a bit of the midground, so it's still important, but it gets overtaken by the ostinato underneath it, or the rhythmic element, where it just comes in with pounding drums, and suddenly that's in the foreground. So that's a good example of a piece when the melody isn't in the foreground. So it's not always, but like I said, 9 times out of 10. And what roles do the other layers play? Bass line helps ground the melody, and or it just helps to ground everything to the harmonic progression of the section. And it's rhythmic, so rhythmic quality helps provide a little energy as well. All right, the harmonies, part written, help provide contrast and a bridge between the lyrical melody and the rhythmic bass line. Also help bring color and character to the music. All right, so these are just my goals, why I am having these layers here, what I want to do with them. So now that we've gotten these big picture or macro level considerations taken care of, we can start looking at more of the detail. So the foreground tone colors, this is the new process I've developed over the past couple weeks for figuring out what tone color I want to do. Typically, I'd ask what emotions or ideas am I trying to portray here, what colors would be useful for portraying it, and which instruments are capable of performing the part and providing the color. I'll answer each of these in turn and figure things out. But for now, I think we've already got the melody figured out. Here we've got it in flute and piccolo, it looks like, with bassoon providing... Oh, bassoon's providing some harmonic support. I hadn't noticed that. All right, so then we got English horn or cor inglés, back to the flutes and strings. All right, so yeah, we're moving around quite a bit in this. So let's see here. We'll just delete these questions for now because we've already kind of answered them. But I'm going to say it goes piccolo and flute. Or technically that's 2 flutes, but I wrote it keeping in mind a piccolo and a flute. Well, let's double check that, see what ranges these are in. All right, so we have a flute in its low register and a flute in its middle register. So yeah, that's not piccolo and flute, that's 2 flutes. Flutes in octaves. Then from there we went into clarinet and I believe strings, didn't we? Nope, clarinet and violas. All right, clarinet and violas. And then after that, we went to flutes again. Flutes and violas this time. So then flutes and violas, where are we? Flutes and violas, and then finally flutes in octaves plus violas. All right, and I know, this isn't all the most exciting stuff happening right now, but this is an honest look at how I do this. This is an honest look of how I come up with parts, how I come up with tone colors, and how I keep track of things. So now the background tone colors, now we can start looking at this a little bit. We've got bassoons. All right, we've got bassoons. Let's actually see bassoons and celli. Let's solo these and see how this sounds. All right, so the celli are on the bass line. Bassoons. Why is there only one? So it looks like, is this supposed to be 2? This is supposed to be 3 bassoons. No, just celli. All right, so this is supposed to be 2 bassoons, but we're only hearing 1, and that's because we have legato activated. If you'll go back here, you will see legato. Now, legato patches in lots of sound libraries are what you call monophonic, meaning you can only hear one voice play at a time. And that's because of the way they're programmed. All right, the idea of a legato patch is when two notes are played, it needs to blend one seamlessly into the other. It's a very complicated process to get true legato in a sound library. And part of that requires that it be monophonic. Some super expensive sound libraries, some really cool ones, can have polyphonic, meaning you could have multiple legato voices going at the same time. But for this, if we want to have two playing, we need to make sure that we have a long or sustained option selected instead of legato. So let's hear this. There we go. So now we can hear both of them. This is pretty nice. We've got basically some voice leading. Here, the E to the G sharp is a major third. That's a bit of a large leap. So normally I'd want to try something like that, where I bridge it. But that can cause some issues because of the dissonance. So yeah, the F would have to be an F sharp because an F forms a tritone. Oops, sorry, I just knocked my T. And it's not playing on my keyboard. The F starts a tritone with the B, which is a very dissonant sound. And we'd want to resolve it by going to the F sharp or to the B flat. So that's actually a really cool technique if you want to create tension in your music, is create a dissonant interval and then resolve it. But we're not going to do that just yet because even though I like the bassoons here, I have a feeling we're going to rewrite this part. But let's go through and find out what kind of tone colors we're looking for. Oh, I got T all over my desk. All right, that's unfortunate. I'll clean it up afterwards. Let's see here. But yeah, back on. So what kind of emotions are we trying to portray here? So this idea is pretty self-explanatory. What emotion do I want to capture? This is the lyrical theme. So I want it to be heroic, but subdued. All right, so I want it to have still heroic characteristics to it, but not the big in-your-face kind of hero. More of the background, more of the like, all right, the hero is a human being kind of thing. Let's see. Oh yes, I'm gonna have to rewatch your videos on harmony because part writing is a pain for me. Yeah, part writing can be tricky, but yeah, I'm glad. Please do. I put a lot of effort into that series. I'm quite proud of the harmony series actually. There's some things I would have liked to cover. For example, I mentioned in the first video that the diminished triad, the diminished seventh in major keys, is a subdominant function. Traditionally, it's been dominant. Traditionally, it's had a dominant function in all classical music. In more contemporary styles, though, since the turn of like the 20th century, there have been a whole host of subdominant functionality, or subdominant functions that have been created and popularized for it. So now it kind of goes back and forth between subdominant and dominant. I would like to cover that. I would like to cover secondary and substitute dominance. Probably should have spent some more time on cadences. But all in all, I think it's a strong series. I think it's very useful. And I'll definitely want to revisit it. But anywho, so yeah, maybe a part 2 to the harmony series. Or a reharmonization. With one of my students, we've been covering reharmonization techniques, and they are so much fun. All right, so what emotions or idea are you trying to portray here? Heroic but subdued. What colors could be useful for portraying this? Double reeds. We've already got the bassoons. The double reeds are the kings of emotion, which is ironic because not a lot of people think of them that way. The bassoon in particular is an emotional chameleon in its strongest register, the middle register. It can perform pretty much any emotion that you need it to. It's very expressive. It can blend well with pretty much any instrument you need to blend it well with. And then the oboe and the English horn are also fantastic choices for emotional themes, for emotional music. I was just listening again to Hans Zimmer's score for At World's End, Pirates of the Caribbean. And I think in the cue, I See Dead People, there's a beautiful, beautiful oboe solo. And really the double-reeded instruments are unmatched for their ability to portray just like inward, like internalized emotions like pining or thinking about things, like kind of emotions that you keep trapped inside you without sharing. These instruments are fantastic choices. They don't get used that very often for that though. So yeah, double reeds would be an excellent choice for this. Strings, without a doubt, strings are also kind of chameleons. They are ubiquitous to film music. Strings can play pretty much any role you need them to do in film music, just because we've been exposed to them so much. And yeah, I think I'll stick to just reeds and strings. We don't have any choir. I don't want to use any brass here because I want to really use the brass to nail home the power. So which part are capable of performing this part and providing the color? Well, the oboe is being used for the melody, not the oboe, but the English horn is being used to play the melody. And the English horn is typically the same player as the oboe player. They just swap between the instruments as needed. Bassoons, so far, are being used for this exact process. So we could say bassoons are capable of it. But I'm not sure if the bassoons are powerful enough, and we'll get to that in a little bit. But bassoons, sorry, you can hear my roommate coughing upstairs. Let's see, and strings. And I tabbed too far, I don't like that. There we go. So yeah, bassoons and strings are both capable of this. They can both play in this range. They can both play below the melody. I'm a little nervous about the bassoons. I'm not sure if they have the power to support what I'm looking for here, but we'll come to that in a second. Oh, we got another one. Awesome. Nikki, thank you very much for recommending those series. That's how the channel grows. And I love helping people learn about music. And so thank you. I really appreciate that you're sharing my videos. Let's see here. So yes, the next step here is considering the three most important aspects of good orchestration. All right, if there's nothing else you take away from this video, remember that orchestration is completely dependent on how you manage your focus, your balance, and your separation across each layer. I'll go more in depth on this. I am currently writing a bunch of scripts. I'm trying to crank out at least one script every day, sometimes multiple, on the new orchestration series. My old orchestration series has still got good information in it, and this next one I want to build on it. The previous one had some poor choices that I used. I didn't use standardized note names for the ranges, and I probably should have. But you live and you learn. This next one's going to update that. I'm going to go a lot more in depth on the individual tone colors for each individual instrument. And I'm going to spend a lot more videos spent on actual processes and strategies for approaching a sketch and figuring out how you want to orchestrate it, including this process that we're doing right here. But we'll go a lot more in depth on balance, separation, and focus here. So the idea here is, the idea of separation is very important for every layer. Here we have three layers. We have the melody, the rhythmic bass line, and the harmonies. We want to understand how do we keep those three layers independent of each other. They want to work together, but you want to make sure that they have their own identities. If they don't have their own identities, if they all blend together, then they're not separate layers. They might be doing different roles, but they're not going to really contribute to a well thought out orchestration because the audience isn't going to be able to separate them. So there are different strategies you can use for separation. If you've seen the original series on orchestration, I recommend a strategy I call PDART, which is separating by pitch, articulation, rhythm, tone color, and or dynamics. Having developed, I found that dynamics can be a little problematic for reasons that we'll explain later, but it's still sound. So how are we going to have separation between each of these layers ideas? So the melody is predominantly in woodwinds. So it might be helpful to use strings, and the bass line is in strings. So use strings in harmony. All right, so I'm sorry, bassoons, but we're probably going to replace you with the strings. We'll find another purpose for you. And we'll do that to separate it from the melody via tone color. All right, then we'll also use pitch because it'll be below it. Keep melody below or above, keep the melody above the harmony as well to separate by pitch. All right, so we've got pitch, we've got tone color that are separating, and of course, as well, we'll say articulation. All right, the melody is lyrical, it's moving around, but the strings are going to be kind of sticking to more, well, I guess they're also going to be sustained, but so we'll say rhythm. they're going to have very different rhythmic values. While the melody has its own distinct rhythmic identity, so will the harmony. The bass line is in staccato, strings, and low woods. So we've got tone color. We'll say articulation, because both the melody and the harmonies are going to be legato. They're going to be sustained sounds. So that's going to keep it separated by articulation, separated by tone color. We'll say pitch, because it's below everything else. So it's got its own particular register. And really, that's good. If you've got three things, if you can separate each layer by three parameters, where you can say this has its own identity because this, and this, then you've pretty much hit the parameter of separation. If you have any questions on that, please feel free to ask. But if not, I'm just going to keep moving along. So how will I maintain balance between each layer or idea? So in proper orchestration, every layer should be of comparable power, unless you have a particular reason why you want one of them to stick out or fade back. I have a sonata I'm working on right now that has a small little motif that keeps popping out in and out of the background, and I purposely try to keep it very subtle, try to keep it in the background, more because I like it from a storytelling standpoint than I do a musical standpoint. So that might be one reason. There are many, but as a default, you want to have balance between each layer. Now, the approach I like to use this without getting too specific is just to think, how big is the foreground? Would I classify it as big, medium, or small instrumentation? If we look up here, we've got two flutes and octaves, then it switches to a clarinet and violas, then flutes and violas, and flutes and octaves and violas. It starts off as very small, just two woodwinds, and then builds into a little bit bigger flutes and octaves and violas. It takes up a lot more space. But I would still say that the foreground is about small to medium instrumentation. All right, it's nothing massive, which means, of course, we need to maintain that same level of balance in the background. Needs to match this. So if I were to put the entire harmony in like brass and just have them play loud, that'd be inappropriate. There would be overpowering background and it wouldn't be balanced. If I were to put this in climactic strings, it'd probably also be a little inappropriate. But the nice thing about strings is the whole string section is very versatile in terms of power level. You can have 60 string players playing quietly and have that constitute small instrumentation, or playing loudly and have it constitute as large instrumentation. Now, there's no hard scale to say, all right, big, small, medium, whatever it is. There's no sliding scale you can use. It's a bit more of like an intuition and experience. You got to just kind of compare it. A litmus test that I was given by a professor of mine was to just think, if every instrument was asked to play at the exact same volume, would it still be balanced? And that's what we need to ask ourselves. The flutes, the woodwinds are all fairly powerful. The flutes in particular are playing mostly in some powerful registers, so they can be heard pretty well over a full string section, so long as the string section's not purposefully trying to drown them out. So I think soft strings could work really well for this. The thing we're going to need to be really careful about will be the rhythmic bass line. Because rhythmic active parts tend to demand more attention than slower parts. But the nice thing is, if we keep it relatively small on the instrumentation size, and if we keep it repetitive, which we definitely have, we see it goes dun, 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 dun. I'm not singing well, but the idea is you can see this rhythmic figure repeats. We basically just copy and pasted the rhythmic figure into the bass line. So it's repetitive, and repetitive lines tend to fall into the background much easier than novel and fresh ideas. Let's see, and yeah, how will I make sure to retain the focus on the foreground? A couple different things we can do. Foreground will maintain the highest register, because all things being equal, higher pitches demand more attention. Foreground will have the most novel material. So again, things that are new, things that introduce change, are more attention grabbing than things that fall into then repetitive things. The bass line here is very repetitive. It's just that All right, whatever. That wasn't as loud as I was hoping. But it's a repetitive rhythmic idea. It'll fall into the background fairly quickly. And then the strings are just sustained pitches. We'll have a little nuance here and there to make it a little more interesting. But all in all, it'll be a repetitive rhythmic figure. So the foreground having the most shift in pitch and rhythm will be the most novel, and that helps it maintain the foreground a little bit. And let's see, is there anything else? We've got the highest pitch. We've got the most interesting thing. And then I'll say, well, it's not going to be the most active. The most active role would technically be the bass line, and active things tend to have more tension. But actually, you know what? Let's take a look at this melody. Maybe it is a little more active than I'm giving it. No, yeah, look at this. Yeah, my Midwesterner lingo is coming out there. No, yeah. But there we go. Yeah, eighth notes. Lots of eighth notes. This is active, so I would say yes, foreground will be the most rhythmically active. These three things together, having changes or an essence of novelty mixed with highest pitch and rhythmically active, all three of those are great tools for maintaining focus on a particular layer in your music. The same goes in reverse. If you want a layer to fall into the background, you can do the opposite of these. So the bass line has the lowest pitch. All right, it is rhythmically active, but it's also very repetitive. So repetitive and low pitch helps it fall into the background. The harmony, we're going to have it be not very active. It's going to be mostly sustained tones. It will not have the highest register. It'll be kind of in the middle, which tends to fall even further than the lowest material. And it will be very repetitive again. It's not going to have a lot of changes. It's just going to follow the chord progression. And with all of this in mind, we have got, a pretty good idea of what we're going to go. So now we've got our melody mapped out. We've got our bass line mapped out. Let's quickly check the bass line, make sure it's looking good. After we've gotten that figured out, we can start working on writing that part writing, the harmonies. All right, so the celli are working on it. I do love having the marimba there. I have no idea why I put it there, other than I just really enjoy marimba. And so I'm going to leave it there. Ooh, that jumped in there, didn't it? That was from the previous. There we go. So, yeah, right now the celli are pretty good. Let's just take a quick note of how we're doing this. We'll put it down there. We'll say B1 orchestration, foreground equals flutes and octaves, then clarinets and violas, then flutes plus violas, then flutes and octaves and violas. So then we'll go harmony. We have not figured out yet. Bass line equals celli and marimba. All right, so we might want to add another instrument. Maybe I'll add those bassoons. But yeah, maybe the bassoons can go on the bass line, give it a rhythmic area and help it double in octaves. For now, harmonies, let's say strings. All right, we're going to have 2 violin sections and a viola section that we can work with here. Let's quickly listen to these harmonies on our sketch. There we go. Okay, yeah, let's do this. Let's quickly take a look at our bass line with that information. We'll select the marimba just because it's got a nice bright color. And let's remove our bass line. Let's see, we'll remove that. And then we had E and F sharp. All right, so here we've got remaining notes. Let's make sure we don't have, let's check and see if we have any inversions. B, nope, so that would be F sharp, A, C. No, not an inversion. E is not an inversion for E major. A is not an inversion. B is not an inversion. E is not an inversion. And F is not an inversion. Lucky us. All right, so no inversion, so there's nothing special we need to keep in mind. Let's just copy these, and then we will replace all those notes we deleted because I don't like to delete stuff permanently from my sketch. Ow, I am getting a foot cramp. But let's move over here and let's just do some part writing, shall we? In the sketch, because what else is the sketch useful for? Let's pull this up. Let's just get everything in root position, shall we? BDF, then GB, EGB, then BDF. All right, so now let's do some voice editing. Oh, we got some more things. Okay, can't watch today. Gotta tell you, man, your work here is amazing. Helped me with a bunch of projects. Thank you so much for that. Awesome, thank you. I'm glad you were able to pop in for a second, and I really appreciate it. I say at the end of every video that it means a lot to me when you guys send like supportive messages and emails and everything, and it really, really does. You cannot overstate how grateful I am for all that, because honestly, there's been lots of moments where I really wanted to give up, or it's very stressful. There's a lot of moments of like, maybe I just won't do a video this week. But just knowing that I'm able to help so many of you guys, and that you're so appreciative, and that I'm helping to bring new music into this world by empowering other people to take control of their own music and understand how they can write the stuff that they want to write, really makes it incredibly rewarding for me and makes me excited to keep doing stuff like this. I mean, like, for example, today I was really nervous to go live again. I haven't gone live in over a month. I was getting a bunch of nerves about it, a little bit of anxiety, but I made some tea, and I knew that hopefully there'd be a couple people that would benefit from it, and now I'm having a blast. I'm really enjoying myself. So thank you. Again, I really do appreciate each and every one of you. Here, let's get back to the task at hand. We're going to very quickly voice lead. Again, as a general rule, if there is a note in common, keep it in the same voice. If there are no voices in common, for example, we have a F sharp minor going into E major. We want to have, these are separated by a second interval. We want to have one note moving by a third, so we'll take this C sharp. It's going to move into a minor third by the E. This helps prevent parallel fourths and fifths from appearing. Again, if you want a more in-depth look at voice leading, it's in the very first video of the Harmony series. All right, A major to B minor. Again, we want one note moving by a third, so we'll have that F sharp moving away from A. Then B minor to E major. We'll bring this down an octave. We'll raise that F. And then E going into B. We've got, yep, there we go. So now we have this fairly well and comprehensively voice led. All right, so a reminder of the purpose behind voice leading is the entire idea is that you are taking the harmonic idea as a whole. And instead of thinking of it as a chord progression, as one chord leading into another chord, you're starting to think about it as more as individual lines blending into different chords together. So for example, we've got this top line. We go from D to C sharp to E again, then D. And then we've got them working together with that bottom line. Oops. All right, so you can see I'm not a very practiced piano player, but the idea here is that we're viewing each of these as individual lines and not as just chord progressions, which is important for orchestration because if you want to create a realistic, professional, traditional sounding orchestral piece, you have to think of things in parts and not as chords. The violins aren't playing, the string section's not playing a chord progression. They're playing harmonic lines. The violins have their lines, the violas have theirs, celli have theirs, and then combined, they create a harmonic progression. But individually, they're lines, and we want to make sure that each one is interesting. Now, something we can do here is we can start to add a little more variety to here. So I'm thinking these are probably going to go in violas, violin 2, and violin 1. So right off the bat, something we can do is let's create a new line. And this is going to go a little away from traditional voice leading. We're sticking to the middle voice, but here I am going to branch up into the upper voice. I'm just going to turn this into violins 1. So let's listen to this. So this will be fun. The one thing I'm a little worried about is this is getting up there a little bit. I don't want it to distract from the underlying, or the overlying, I should say, melody. I don't want this to chart and pull away from the foreground. Fortunately, I do think the flutes play higher than this. We'll adjust it, and violins can play fairly quietly, so I'm not overly worried about it. Something we could do here is we could shift this. I thought I had put my phone on silent. I'm sorry, let me do that now. Let's see here. Oh yeah, thank you. Sorry, I didn't see your words of encouragement. I really appreciate it. Yeah, no worries. I'm feeling good. I'm not feeling any kind of burnout. I'm doing well, and I'm really enjoying doing this stuff. So sometimes I just get in my own head at times, but don't worry. If I ever do need to take a break, I will. Like I took a break from the live videos, but I'm feeling good right now. I really appreciate it though. Thank you. Let's see here. So one thing we could do is we could move this and have these be our individual lines, which I kind of like this. Something else we could do is keep this A moving to the F instead of up to the B, which would add some contrasting motion. And I actually really like the idea of that. So let's try something. My one issue is E to B is a interval of a perfect fourth. That's quite large. So this is where our little part writing theory comes in here. We can drop this down. We'll go down to a C sharp because we have a C sharp in this chord. So we're going to be doubling on the same chord tone for like a beat, but it helps break down this gap. From E down to B, we can have some stepwise motion. And I do like that. I like having a contrasting motion between the lowest line and the upper line whenever possible. Because again, it helps emphasize the separation between each layer. So let's give it a try. Let's check this out. Let's take this top line. We'll copy that. Let's bring it over to the strings. We're just going to bridge these two parts. Pop this here. We will, for now, I don't like relying on this too much, but we will put this into piano. Let's make sure it's mapped up. All right, so yeah, I don't typically like using the send to controller and go to modulation. It's very useful. It helps blend it and tells the computer to take more control over the dynamics. When possible, I like to use a modulation wheel, which gives me more control. And because of the human element involved, it creates some variety between each individual layer. For reasons I'll go in a little bit later. In a future video, once we start going into the actual making this all sound much more realistic. But for now, let's see how this works. Oops. I'm liking that. I'm liking that so far. Let's add the other string layers. All right. This will go in violins 2. And it goes to the B below middle C, just double checking to make sure that can fit in the range. Yes, it can. The violin can play as low as the G below middle C in most cases. If you tune it differently, you can go a little lower, but that's always a bit risky just because it can have an unexpected shift in tone color. Declan, hey, how's it going? Better from moving in this stream. Hope your finals, holidays, and New Year went well. Yes, everything went really well. Thank you. A couple things came up regarding school, but I'm doing pretty well. I learned a bunch last semester, and I'm looking forward to applying a lot of it in these videos. So thank you. Yeah, I hope things are going well for you. Last we talked on Patreon, you said that you were going through finals and it was keeping you pretty busy. Yeah, I definitely get that. So I hope things everyone well for you. I hope you're enjoying your holiday break, and I hope you like the music. Let's see here. So going to long here. So let's do legato. Why not? And we'll go to piano, which means soft. We've got the modulation set on this. Let's listen to it. Why is this so much louder? You know what? That's because legato in Spitfire in this particular library tends to be a little bit longer than sustained. I don't know why. There we go. See, yeah, that was a pretty big difference. And that's just part of the process. I get asked a lot what the best sound libraries are. I've had a couple students lately asking me what the best DAW is. Some of them are getting into synthesizers and were asking my opinions on the best synthesizer. And honestly, a long time ago, I heard a quote by Hans Zimmer on picking the right DAW, picking the right software, and it just really stuck with me, where he said that the best one is just going to be the one that you learn the most, like the one that you understand the most. And I've found that to be the truth everywhere. Whatever software you're going to work with, learn it. All right. Learn all the idiosyncrasies. Read the manual. I cannot stress that enough. YouTube is wonderful. It really is. But if you are able to read the manual, you will learn so much about your instrument that just other people haven't brought up on YouTube yet. For example, I have been reading the manual for Contact, and I have been learning so much because I do want to make my own sound libraries down the road. I want to sample a couple of musicians that I know. Now, here we ran into an issue. All right, we just wrote this harmonic line for the violas, completely forgetting that the violas are part of the melody. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop the celli. I'm going to turn them into the basses instead, which is going to cause a bit of an issue. Because if you'll notice here, there are 4 basses, but 12 celli. And so we have just effectively cut our power in the bass line quite a bit. But we'll address that because fortunately we have these bassoons that we're so suddenly no longer using. So, because the strings are me doing the melodies or the harmonies. So let's slap the viola part in the celli, because any part that a viola can play in its lower register, the celli can also play. Their ranges overlap by quite a bit. And the one thing to keep in mind, though, is just there isn't really a substitution for the viola's low register. Violas get a bad rep because of channels like two-set violin. And don't get me wrong, I love two-set violin. They're incredible. But lots of jokes out there about violas. Really, the viola's biggest strength, in my opinion, is its low register. It just has a incredibly rich tone color. Very unique tone color that the violins can't play because they can't go that low. And for the celli can play it, but it just doesn't have the same tone color because it's closer to the cello's mid register than, well, it's in the lowest register for the violas. And it just brings a different level of tension to it. So that's just I'll get off my soapbox, but let's give this a listen. Oops. All right, so obviously there's going to be some balancing issues across the sound libraries themselves, but for the most part, this is pretty well sound. I'm liking how this turned out. Theoretically, from an orchestration standpoint, the instrument choices are pretty sound. The woodwinds working together, especially in octaves for the flutes, are more than powerful enough to be heard over a string section playing softly. The strings can all, of course, hold their own. Violas are more than capable of holding their own in the melody. The one thing that might be a little unrealistic is how loud this bass line is at the moment. But yeah, at this point, finding the right blend is going to be a matter of just tweaking the settings for the sound libraries. I really like this so far. Real quick, let's take this bass line. Let's pop it in our bassoons, because I do want to use the bassoons. And again, I don't think 4 basses and a marimba are going to have quite the kind of prominence that I would like this bass line to have. So if we just, boom, pop that there. And because I don't like to have, I like to think of woodwind instruments as individuals and not a section. Let's try. Let's make sure that this is all good. This is the C in the middle of the bass clef going down to E. Yeah, the bassoon can play this. The bassoon can play this, no problem. We'll put this in staccato. We'll put it mezzo piano, so kind of soft. We'll turn on the modulation since it's just a sketch. All right, I'm liking this string part. It's not as dynamic as I had been envisioning, mostly because it's just voice leading. I didn't do much part writing, and I think that's okay. If I really want to, I'll revisit this and do some part writing for it to make it. John Williams is known for having very lush parts for his strings, where they're moving, they're performing the harmonies, but they're really coming into their own as kind of like background melodic voices. And that has a little bit to do with counterpoint, a lot to do with part writing. I would love to do that for this, but we're running out of time today. Maybe we'll tackle that next episode. But for the now, I'm quite happy with this. So let's listen to this from the start. There we go, and I love a good horn solo. That's why the horn solo didn't come in. Hold up. That's my bad. I have got all these things muted. Make sure the sketch is still muted. Yep. You know what? Let's do this. Let's just highlight everything and watch it as it enters. This will be fun. We've got a couple more minutes. So after this playthrough, I'll be open to just stay on for a little bit and listen to any questions you guys got and try my best to answer them. So if you got questions, shoot them down below while we're listening to this, and I'll try and answer each of them to the best of my ability. All right? And here we go. What instrument is this? Oh, it's basses. Must be tuba. Oh, I love a good horn solo. I'm gonna have to make that more prominent when we mix this. And we're rapidly getting to that point. We're getting to the point where the sketch can hold its own, all the fundamentals are good. And so in a few episodes, the moment the sketch is done, oh, I love it when low brass comes in. We'll start getting into how to take a MIDI sketch and make it more realistic. We'll talk about mixing, things that you should really consider about reverb that don't often get considered, and really how to make sure that everything sounds as realistic as possible. And then, of course, we'll tackle a little bit about mastering at the end. Which mastering for a single piece is just kind of subtle. Mastering is typically more on like the CD or soundtrack level. I like that. It's a bit abrupt to switch, so we'll have to make a transition better. But here we go, we're getting into the second repetition. It sounds like the bassoon's struggling there a little bit. Oh yeah, there we've got the climactic strings. We're playing in how many octaves is this? 1, 2, 3, 4 octaves. So this is gonna be huge once we're done orchestrating it. I imagine the brass is gonna play a very prominent role in this return to the primary theme. And then of course, coming back down, but because we want this to be loopable, since it's a character's theme for a D&D game, we want to make sure that you can repeat it as long as you need to. All right, awesome. And yeah, awesome. So I predict within a couple more episodes, this sketch should be able to stand on its own, and we'll start to really get into the nitty gritty of making sure it all works together. So let's see. Any questions? Whoa, yeah. All right. Let's see here. Where was I left off? Let's see. Awesome. Yeah, Declan, good job. Declan came out with A's last semester. Incredible. That's hard work. It really is. Especially, I certainly don't get straight A's. But I spend my time doing too much other stuff. I let a homework assignment slip here and there. I like to think of myself as a good student, but honestly, if I feel like doing a homework assignment is going to get in the way of me trying to internalize a topic, I just won't do it. And I know that sounds contradicting, but if like the deadline to turn something in is too soon and I feel like I would have to rush to get the homework assignment in, whereas I can just take my time and study the material and apply it at my own pace, I've been known to let a couple things slide. But I mean, I'm not failing any classes or anything, but long story short, this is about you. Congratulations. That's huge. That's awesome. Let's see here. Nikki. Awesome. Nikki is congratulating. Wow, I'm sorry if I'm butchering your name. Wow, Vitor. Yeah, I'm definitely butchering that, so I apologize. But now that you mentioned it, how should I start studying Counterpoint? Any recommendations? Two, actually. There are 2 resources for Counterpoint that I have found incredibly helpful. I don't have my book with me right now, but there is a book from the Berkeley Press on contemporary Counterpoint. Very helpful. Awesome resource. On YouTube, Alan Belkin, who is the author of one of my favorite books of all time. If you've been on this channel for any given amount of time, I've plugged it at least a dozen times by now. I'm hoping he'll send me a signed copy at some point. But it really is an incredible book. And he has a wonderful series on YouTube about Counterpoint. So if you start with that, my main recommendation for learning Counterpoint, because teaching yourself Counterpoint is no simple task. It's a very complicated, very discouraging process at times. Take your time. All right, if you're going to use the book or you're going to do a video series, don't speed through it. Take one at a time. I was talking to one of my students recently in an email because they started to read some books that I recommended. I told them that my own process for reading books, because when I first started out, I did not find books very helpful. And I had to realize it was because of the way I was reading them. I would read a book, taking notes while I was going, and then I'd blitz through an entire book in a day and realize at the end of the day I hadn't internalized any of it. Now, the way I do it is definitely very tedious, but it's helped me so much. I'll actually typically read books 1 chapter at a time, and I'll reread them, that chapter, like 2 or 3 times. I'll read it one time without taking any notes, just to kind of introduce myself to the material. Then I'll read it again, this time taking notes over everything that I now know to be important within the context of the entire chapter, everything that I want to make sure I internalize. Then I'll take some time away from it. I'll make sure that I have internalized all of it, that I have come to some level of mastery over the material, and I'll reread the chapter a 3rd time. And that one can always be really tedious, but I still force myself to do it because on more than one occasion, rereading a chapter with the context of everything that you've learned, you notice something you missed. Something that didn't stick out to you because you didn't understand the concepts quite that well. But now suddenly, with all that new information, with all that new context, something sticks out and you want to pick that up as well. So yeah, it's definitely tedious. It has slowed down my reading a lot, but I largely credit that and the amount of time I spend just studying music day in and day out that has helped me have such rapid growth as a composer in the past couple of years. So yeah, that's the long story answer to your question. I tend to ramble a lot, don't I? But hopefully it's helpful. Let's see it. I've just finished your videos on harmony. Have you touched on the subject on the melody videos? I have not touched on the subject of counterpoint in the melody videos. So the melody videos really are focused, because counterpoint really is its own thing. Counterpoint actually existed before chords. Chords and voice leading they came from Counterpoint. Originally, the idea of polyphony was the idea that you had multiple lines singing together. It started out with just a melody line and then like tenors singing a bass line underneath it in Gregorian chant. Then from there, it started to branch into multiple polyphonic or multiple lines working together. And around the time of the Baroque period, what happened is people just started to realize when they were writing different parts, certain combinations of voices really work together. And so this quote-unquote modern harmony theory was established about the triads, chord extensions, all that kind of stuff, and it kind of grew from there. So counterpoint really is its own thing outside of harmony. I have been thinking about doing a counterpoint series eventually, but it's such a nuanced topic that I'd like to spend some time on some other foundational stuff first. So, yeah, where was I going with it? But yeah, so yeah, the Melody series is good. I never ended up doing all the videos for that one as I wanted. I covered everything that I thought was necessary, everything that I thought was the most important to get out there. But viewership really started to lag near the end. And so I just thought, if it gets popular online, I'll revisit it. Same with the film scoring series. I know it's not as sexy as like learning how to write certain kinds of theories, but the last 4 videos I put out on film scoring were dedicated to really important technical aspects of film scoring. Things that you need to know if you want to go from composing music to composing music for a story and for a film. And the two don't always transition well into each other. You can have an incredible musician who has an incredible command over their instrument and loves to write music, but just don't seem to match well with film scoring, because something that a lot of musicians need to understand is the music is second tier to the movie. The composer is one of the last people brought on traditionally, and your whole job is to serve the story. Your music cannot distract from it. And so that series talks a lot about the technical aspects, the strategies and the techniques necessary to do that stuff. Viewership wasn't pretty good on that one, so again, I stuck to just the fundamentals. If it builds up later, I'll revisit it. But I'm pretty happy with that series as well. Right now, I'm working on a short video to celebrate Attack on Titan, the final season coming out on Sunday. So I'm going to do a video on epic music and epic genres and how you can kind of emulate that in your own music. But yeah, so I'm excited about that. And if that one goes over well, then I might just do a series of templates, which I know I've got my book right here. If you haven't got my book, check it out. In here, I am a little harsh on templates. I talk about how they're useful, but limitedly, in a limited capacity. But I still think it's important to learn different templates and different cliches, because once you know what's expected, then you can start to find out how to make twists and turn it into your own thing. And honestly, it's good to know what other people have done and what have become standards before you can reinvent the wheel and do your own thing. So I would like to do a series on different cliches, like what are the love song cliches, what are the action music cliches, all these different things, and what different ways, little tricks you can use to try and automatically fit into a genre. So I'm thinking that's the next direction I'll be going in, but we'll see. I am also completely overhauling the orchestration series, which originally I had planned on doing a reboot, but I still think a lot of the information in the original series is good. So this next one is really going to be kind of like an extension of it. I'm going to go a lot more in depth on the individual tone colors and qualities of every instrument. And then I'm going to spend a lot more episodes dedicated to an actual process, so how do you approach orchestrating harmony versus melody? We'll go a lot more in depth on those topics we discussed today of separation, balance, and focus, and how those are really the 3 most important pillars to effective orchestration. We'll go into a bunch of different stuff so that by the end, you don't just have a box of tricks that you can rely on, but you have an actual methodology and strategy to find out how you want to orchestrate your music and be a little more creative with creating your own ideas. But, got some more questions out here. Will you be taking part in Score Relief this month? I don't know what that is. Score Relief. It sounds awesome. I'll look it up. I'll see. Maybe. I don't know. Right now, I've got a couple other things I'm focusing on, but that sounds like fun. Gonna appreciate it a lot if you end up doing it. Thank you. Yes. Oh, I would love to do it. So Counterpoint videos are definitely... I've got a list of different things I want to do eventually. I want to do a series on counterpoint. I want to do a series on synthesizers. Honestly, lately, since I've been learning so much about Contact 6, I want to do a series on creating your own sound libraries. But I want to build more experience with that for a while first. I want to build a couple of my own sound libraries, sample my own instruments, find my own process, and then do a series in depth on how to use Contact, because it's just been difficult finding a lot of information out there. And honestly, reading the manual is time consuming, but it is like the best way to learn the instrument. So yeah, I've got a whole host of ideas of stuff I want to do eventually. It's just a matter of time being able to do it. I like to travel when I write scripts. I don't mean like go out of town or like travel to different countries or anything. I like to go to a coffee house. I like to go somewhere with a different environment when I write. And so a lot of that comes down to when I have time to go somewhere. And especially for big projects like the Orchestration series, the Melody series, the Harmony series, I like to have almost the entire series mapped out in terms of what topics I want to tackle, what things I want to teach, all that in what order, to make sure that it's all comprehensive and that it makes as much sense as possible and that each thing builds on the last. And once I've got that all mapped out, that's when I'll start recording and making videos. Yep, and yeah, glad to help. Both the template and orchestration series sound really interesting. Awesome, thanks. Yeah, I'm excited too. I think orchestration is one of the most important skill sets you can develop as a composer. Honestly, I've said it a couple times, but the two most important things to gain complete mastery over as a composer or a film composer, in my opinion, are harmony. Harmony is number one, and orchestration is number two. Melody comes in as a close three, but honestly, in my experience, if you are really good at writing your own harmonies and coming up with your own chord progressions that can serve and tell a story, the melody can grow from there. And really, so harmony is huge. That's why that was one of the first series I did on comprehensive. And there's a lot of stuff I want to cover on harmony down the line. So I'll probably do a second series on harmony, going into more advanced stuff and really going into strategies beyond the simple strong, weak strategy that I discussed in that series. But yes, could you consider doing something about counter melodies? You used the term several times in your Ghibli series, but I haven't been able to track down much information about them. Actually, funny that you mentioned, that was one of the videos that got axed from the Melody series, unfortunately. That was one of the videos I was going to do, but the viewership was just going down and down and down and down. And I do rely on some of that ad revenue I get from videos. It helps me stay off the streets, because I don't make a lot of money, but the ad revenue helps. And so if I see that something is just kind of flunking, then I just got to let it go and try something new. That happened with the film scoring series. I had a lot more stuff I wanted to cover in that, but the videos just weren't performing well. If the series explodes or if people find it interesting down the line, then I'll definitely revisit. But anywho, that doesn't help you. That doesn't help you at all. So let me, we're going a little over, but I'll discuss some concepts for counter melodies. The biggest idea behind a counter melody is that it's not a full melody, or it can be, but it supports the primary melody. All right, it exists to support the primary melody. That being in mind, you have to make sure that it doesn't distract from the melody. Now, there are three unique types that you can approach for a counter melody. You have the rhythmic counter melody, which is basically just an ostinato. You have a harmonic counter melody, which is basically just like voice leading. It's a prominent line in your chords where it sticks to just chordal tones. And then there's the like actual melodic counter melody, where you use predominantly notes from the underlying harmony, but you can branch away from it a little bit, similar to like an actual melody. The big takeaway that you should have is that anytime your melody is active, your counter melody should be comparatively lazy. So if your melody is moving around with a bunch of eighth notes, your counter melody should just be moving slowly with half notes or quarter notes or just sustaining or not even playing at all. When your melody itself is sustaining or resting, if it's paused for a beat or two, if it's sustaining a whole note through an entire measure, that's when your counter melody can come in. It can echo an idea that your melody just stated. It can create its own new idea that's related to the original idea, whatever it is. But the idea is that they shouldn't be active together. If they're active at the same time, that's not so much a counter melody as it is counterpoint. So the idea is like, yeah, a counter melody is supposed to stay in the background. It complements the melody. The big takeaway, it's active when your melody is not. It's inactive when your melody is. I hope that helps. Maybe down the line I'll do another video on it. I'd have to see the melody series would have to be a lot more popular for me to build on that. But there are some stuff I might do a standalone. That's another thing. I want to do a standalone video on making ostinatos. Because I've got a process for that I found is very useful and a lot of my students really appreciate. So I'll do a video on that, and yeah, maybe actually, I think I'll probably do a video on counter melodies as well. It won't be part of the melody series, but it'll just be a quick breakdown. Maybe I'll do that after the ostinato video. So yeah, keep an eye out for that, and thank you for the idea. Let's see. And Score Relief is a YouTube competition. There's 2 different competitions. One of them is scoring a short animated clip. Oh, awesome! That sounds, yeah. Depends on when the deadline is. If there's a deadline. If it's anytime soon, right now I'm working on a piece that hopefully, big if, but hopefully would be my live premiere as both a composer and a conductor. It's looking good. I don't want to jinx it, knock on wood, but so most of my time has been spent dedicated to shaping that piece, writing it, getting the rough sketches out, and hopefully being able to make this connection that I'm desperately trying to make. So we'll see. That's what most of my time is. But if I've got time for this, that sounds like a really fun project to do because I do love working on short films. I don't get to do it as often as I would like. Here and there, I get little projects, but most of my stuff is standalone. So I would love to be able to work on a project. It's been a long time since I've worked on one and gotten paid for it. Let's see. Especially the remark about the difference between counter melody and power. Right? Awesome. Excellent. So I'm glad I was able to help. This was really fun talking with all of you guys. And we made some good progress on this piece. I'm excited. We are now officially like 12 minutes over the limit here. I try not to go too long on these. So I will have to let you guys go for now. Until next time, I'll see you probably next Friday. I'll do another live stream. This was really fun. As always, well, before I do the closing, if you want to support the channel, Patreon, there's the donations and the links. Check out my book on film composing. This really focuses not so much on the technical stuff that my YouTube series did, but this one really goes into how you can take characters and not just use them to inspire a theme, but to translate the character into music, how to take story worlds, how to take emotions, all these things and translate into music. If you want an example, I have a book where it's basically just the chapter on emotions. So look up Film Scoring, What You Need to Know About Emotions. It's on my channel. Check that out. If you like it, check out the book. They're both ebook, audiobooks, and physical copies. And also, I'm teaching lessons now. I've got a couple students, but there's a couple spaces left. So yeah, let me know. In the meantime, keep studying, keep working hard, and as always, keep writing new music, guys. I hope you have a wonderful time, and I will see you next week. All right, awesome. See ya.